morning, and thank you, Otter. Morning and welcome to Decorah UU. We are a welcoming and lay-led spiritual community moving together in time in an open search for truth and meaning. We believe in people's inherent capacity to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment, pursuing the good of humanity. My name is Lyra McKnight, and my pronouns are she, her. I will be the service leader today. Does everyone have a bulletin? Great. If you're visiting us today, we welcome you and invite you to join us for fellowship. Introduce yourself following the service. Sorry, if you wish to introduce yourself to everyone now, please do so, but only if you feel comfortable doing so. I'll be happy to pass the mic. Anybody online?
Nobody has raised a hand or unmuted, so I think that we're okay online.
Great, thanks, Karen.
Sure.
Please note the announcements in our order of service. Are there any announcements someone would like to highlight or additional announcements? I'll pass the mic around if you wish to share something.
Thanks. On this Tuesday, August 17th, Collective Action for Racial Equity will be having our monthly meeting in Phelps Park. And if you'd like to know more about that, you can see me.
Carolyn?
You might actually be able to remember more about this than I will, but I know that we do have a program now for August 29th. Nancy Berry is going to be speaking, I think, about stuff, and Beth Wahlberg will be leading. So in case you're curious about what's happening on the 29th, Otter, is there anything else I should mention about that?
I don't know anything anymore.
Okay, all right. I would be looking at my email, but I don't want to navigate from Zoom. So let it be known, further details will be coming, but we do know that something specific will be happening on the 29th.
Great, anybody else? Okay, today's service relates to our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Our opening words. The country is in deep trouble. We've forgotten that a rich life consists fundamentally of serving others, trying to leave the world a little better than you found it. We need the courage to question the powers that be, the courage to be impatient with evil and patient with people, the courage to fight for social justice. In many instances, we will be stepping out on nothing and just hoping to land on something. But that's the struggle. To live is to wrestle with despair, yet never allow despair to have the last words. And that's from Cornell West. Please rise in body and or spirit and turn to our opening song in your bulletin. We are a gentle, angry people.
Anyway, right? Yeah. So we have an opening tune or melody. Yeah. Right.
We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are young and well together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
All right, and our chalice sliding.
Microphone.
Want to do that first? Do you want to read it and I'll light it? Sounds good. I can't light a candle.
Not
Seriously.
This is the fire that burns deep in the soul. It is the flame of the human spirit, touched into being by the mystery of life. It is the fire of reason, the fire of compassion, the fire of community, the fire of justice, the fire of faith. It is the fire of love burning deep in the human heart, the divine glow in every life.
And now is the time for our land acknowledgement. You may be seated if you so wish. With this land acknowledgement, our congregation is engaging in a practice of truth-telling and reconciliation. Northeast Iowa was first home to the Iowa or Baksoche, the Sac and Fox or Meskwaki, the Dakota, and the Ho-Chunk, also known as the Winnebago. We recognize the ongoing relationship of Indigenous people to this land and follow their lead as we endeavor to be stewards as we go forward. Please pause for a moment as we commit our hearts to uplifting, standing with, listening to, and following the lead of Black, Indigenous, and people of color as we endeavor to create the world in which we want to live.
This is the time in our service when we invite anyone who wishes to do so to step forward in body or spirit and share with us a personal joy, concern, or milestone in your life. Please use a microphone so that those with hearing loss are not excluded from hearing what you have to say, and I will pass it around.
Well, we have this beautiful morning, and I was thinking about the joy of bounty. Every day I go to my garden, I have more than I can consume each day now. And I'm very grateful, very thankful for that. But at the same time, I think about so many who do not have that bounty. I have that bounty, and I think it's great. Sometimes I think I've got too much. And hey there, you've got too much. You better think about that. And I do. And it bothers me, but I enjoy the bounty. It's easy to be a vegetarian these days. So but anyway, I keep thinking about the bounty I have and the many that do not have that bounty.
Anybody else?
I was seeing pictures of Haiti today on the news, and it's terrible. And they are now facing 2 major storms coming at them. So they need prayers and assistance.
Thank you.
I just want to mention that my granddaughter, who's 7 months old, is just starting to crawl, and she goes very fast.
What a joy.
And I'd also like to add that my daughter, who already has a daughter, has now announced her 2nd pregnancy. So I'm going to be a grandma again.
Congratulations. What a great story.
All right. Now, in preparation for a moment of silent meditation, I light a virtual candle for joys or concerns that are unspoken, but that remain in our hearts and minds. Please join me in singing the response printed in your bulletin.
Your joy is my joy, your sorrow my sorrow. Together we live our days, together we love this place in beloved community. We are not alone.
It's now time for the offering. Part of our fellowship's commitment and outreach to our community is to support worthy organizations. This month's recipient is Sunflower Child Care Center. To donate to the recipient, simply designate so on your check or offering envelope. Loose cash in the offering bowl goes to Decorah UU. We deeply appreciate the gracious gifts of our members and friends, whether given on a weekly, monthly, or annual basis. Please join me in singing the offertory.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is our gift that we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Thank you, Lyra. And we wanted to send a special thank you to Janet, who brought a little bit of libations for us. So if you're here today, sorry if you're on Zoom, you can fill your cup with a little Java right up here at the coffee station with half and half. I mean, decadent, but why not, right? We deserve it. I brought some readings from the Common Bowl, except I didn't cut them into little bits. So I'm gonna have you send a piece of paper around. So I'll just send the paper and the microphone. And if you feel like reading, please read the next quote. And if you're not in the mood for reading, you can pass. Harvey, did you want to start?
What I'm going to say, but
And you don't have to read the name of the author.
I think it's important. Though. I like to hear it.
Read the name of the author.
Justice comes alive within us, or it doesn't come alive at all. Frederick and Mary Ann Rousseau, I don't know those people. All the good things I don't know.
Person who lacks the verdancy of justice is dry, totally without tender goodness, totally without illuminating virtue. Hildegard of Bingen, my favorite.
There may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must be never a time when we fail to protest. Elie Wiesel, she used the German.
Elie Wiesel.
Yeah.
How do you say that? Elie Wiesel.
Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. Martin Luther King Jr.
Justice demands integrity. It's to have a moral universe, not only know what is right or wrong, but to put things in perspective, weigh things. Justice is different from violence and retribution. It requires complex accounting. Bell hooks.
We are not to simply bandage the wounds of victims beneath the wheels of injustice. We are to drive a spoke into the wheel itself. Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Whether we and our politicians know it or not, nature is party to all our deals and decisions, and she has more votes, a longer memory, and a sterner sense of justice than we do. Wendell Berry.
Because we tend to be biased in favor of our own viewpoint, it is important to keep the standard of fairness at the forefront of our thinking. This is especially important when the situation may call on us to see things we don't want to see, or give something up that we want to hold onto. Linda Elder.
Law and justice are not always the same. When they aren't, destroying the law may be the first step toward changing it. Gloria Steinem.
Never forget that justice is what love looks like in public. Cornell West.
Let's take a moment.
Today's speaker is Carolyn Corbin. Carolyn will read to us the story Francis Harper Bends the Ark by Jessica York.
This is a story from Touchstones series that we have access to, and there's a lot of great readings and stories. So I'm going to read this short story, and then we're going to follow up with a chance to have a little conversation about what we've heard and about justice. Francis Harper Bends the Ark by Jessica York. Sometimes freedom is a long time coming. Reverend Theodore Parker said, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. From what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice." The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. often used this quote. Barack Obama, 44th and first African-American president of the United States, added, "But here is the thing. It does not bend on its own. It bends because each of us in our own ways put our hand on that arc and we bend it in the direction of justice." The hands of Unitarian Universalists have been bending the arc for many years. You may have heard of John Adams, Susan B. Anthony, Christopher Reeve, or Rachel Carson. Have you heard of Frances Ellen Watkins Harper? Her hand was on the arc too. Harper was born a free Black woman in Baltimore, Maryland in 1825. She was raised in the household of her uncle, an educator, minister, and abolitionist, a person who objected to the enslavement of Blacks. Harper followed in her uncle's footsteps to become an educator and abolitionist. She also became a writer, publishing her first book of poetry at 20 and publishing the first short story by an African-American woman later in life. Her writing often urged Blacks, women, and people in oppressed groups to take a firm stand for equality. In 1850, the Fugitive Slave Act was passed. It became dangerous to be a free Black in Maryland because slave owners could claim Black people were runaway slaves and force them into slavery. So Harper moved farther north to Ohio and then to Philadelphia. She taught, ran part of the Underground Railroad, and lectured around the country to bend the arc towards justice for African Americans. In 1863, abolitionists celebrated success with the passage of the Emancipation Proclamation. It did not immediately create a world where African Americans were treated equally and fairly, but it did make slavery illegal. Harper saw that there was still work to be done. She put her hand toward women's civil rights, in particular, the rights of Black women and the right of all women to vote. She co-founded the National Association of Colored Women. Again, she toured and lectured on the topic of freedom. Her lectures and writings spoke to the need for women to be free, to be more than wives and mothers. She understood what she was talking about, a mother herself. After her husband died, Francis Harper took her daughter with her on her lecture tours. During her justice work, Harper met many Unitarians also working to bend the arc. She felt at home with our liberal religious beliefs and knew that her work could strengthen the justice work of the Unitarians. She joined hands with them by joining the first Unitarian church in Philadelphia in 1870. She read her poetry from the pulpit at this church, yet she kept her membership and taught Sunday school at an AME church too. Harper died in 1911, before the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote in 1919. Harper understood that her labors might bring about freedoms she would never enjoy. She said, Apparent failure may hold in its rough shell the germs of a success that will blossom in time and bear fruit throughout eternity. Some of the fruits of Harper's labor are enjoyed by us today. Yet we are not done. Oppression still exists in our world. Our hands are needed for bending the arc until victory is won. Let's have a moment. And we're very fortunate to have Sue Adi, who's prepared to talk a little bit about the proposed 8th principle with the UU. Would you like to talk about that now?
I would.
Yeah, Sue, if you wouldn't mind coming up here, then the people on Zoom could see you.
Perhaps some of you are familiar with this proposed 8th principle to be added to our Unitarian Universalist 7 principles that we have right now. I think if you have a hymnal, or if you've been online, or if you get the UU World magazine, you'll often see those principles and purposes that follow them listed there. We have 7 principles that are in Article 2 of our bylaws as an organization of Unitarian Universalists. And in those bylaws, the principles have attempted to address most of our concerns: who we are, what we believe, how we organize ourselves, and what we strive to do and be in our society. But some have thought, just like we've seen a lot of problems in other parts of our world, other parts of our legislative processes in this country, that we haven't really addressed systemic racism and oppression very well. It has existed, of course, in our denomination as well as in many others, sometimes hidden and not easily recognized. And so several years ago, a group got together and proposed an 8th principle. Now, if you turn to your bulletin, you'll see the 2nd principle that we are focusing on this morning, and how that lists this is the one we usually refer to when we speak about issues relating to justice. It says that we believe in and we promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. But many have thought that doesn't really go far enough. And so an 8th principle has been proposed, and there is a study group working on it right now. And they plan, I believe, to come up with a proposal that will be announced and voted on at 2 successive general assemblies in 2023 and 2024, I believe. And the principle reads like this, the new principle, which would be added as an 8th principle. We, the member congregations of the UUA, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. So it's a lot of words there, but it looks a little more deeply at some of those ideas that our 2nd principle has expressed, but perhaps not completely. So I don't know completely how I feel about this either, because I'm one who likes to see things condensed into smaller numbers of things so that we can have an understanding without needlessly going on and having perhaps more words than we need to express an idea. But it's an interesting thing to think about, and I'm hoping that the UU magazine will soon do something with a little bit more information on the background of it. If you go to uua.org/A2SC, that's the study group, basically. And if you look it up on the site, you could find it. But that's the study group that is looking at this. And if you get on their list, then you can get updates about what's happening. And perhaps sometime in the future, we, looking at this principle, can have a discussion of what we think about it. Not, I think many of us would agree with the principle, the words expressed. It becomes, for some of us, perhaps, as I said, a matter more of how many words do we want in our general guiding principles. So I thought it would be good to know. It does. I will read it again. We, the member congregations of the UUA, covenant to affirm and promote, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse and multicultural beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. The only other thing that I wanted to say about this today was that it also stated in this piece from the UUA that member congregations are able to adopt this principle themselves as individual congregations, even though it may not become part of the UUA. So as our own particular fellowship here, we could adopt it after. I would imagine it would be appropriate that we had a good discussion among members and enough opportunity for everybody to become familiar with it. But it's an interesting thing to see right now when we are facing a lot of problems in our country. And I almost wanted to say earlier during our discussion, our time of joys and sorrows, that the words, I'm concerned that we're seeing this in our own community, the words equality and equity are being thrown around a lot by some groups. Equality meaning that we are all equal and we all have equal responsibility and equal rights, and that's great. And then the equity idea that, unfortunately, even though we all have on paper equal rights, many people have been kept from enjoying those rights. And so we need a sense of equity to allow that. For example, redlining that made it impossible for African-American families to even buy a property and start building their own wealth. And so there have been many problems, and this word equity and the word equality are something you might want to be aware of as we're talking about these issues of oppression built into our culture and into our, sometimes even into our churches. So we have to be on our toes. Thank you.
Oh, wait, so when was the seventh principle adopted? Any idea?
I'm not sure, Harvey. When the UUA formed in '61, when the Unitarians and Universalists came together, I don't know if all 7 principles were intact then. Do you know? Karen,
I don't remember. I feel that,
7th was later, maybe.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. No, have to do a little more research.
I do.
Any other questions, Karen?
May I?
It's not so much a question as the fact that you can go to also 8principleuu.org to read more about the origin of this movement and more about the people involved and what has happened since it was originally proposed, et cetera. So yes, there's the study, but there's also 8principleuu.org. And for me, it's like, yes, we have these 7 principles that should encompass dismantling systemic racism, but it's kind of like saying all lives matter is the same thing as saying Black Lives Matter. And so the impetus towards the 8th principle is explicitly naming that particular form of oppression in our society. There were 2 things also that I just wanted to comment on. And to kind of implicitly address one of those is that as Carolyn was reading the story and talking about Francis and the Unitarians, it really was the Unitarians at that time, because the merger had not yet happened with the Unitarian Universalists. So just wanted to be clear about that historical aspect of it. And then also there was a reference to AME, and just wanted to mention that that stands for African Methodist Episcopal. So I think it was important for Francis to remain grounded in a faith community that was primarily people of color, even though she had a lot of affinities for the Unitarians.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you, Karen. Always a wealth of information and context for us. So we're going to just step into reflecting and thinking and sharing. And pause for just a moment to listen to the crickets.
The sounds of nature.
The sounds of the cicadas and nature and human beings and so forth.
Web of life.
It's so good to be outdoors. So I feel like we're all really reflecting about what is our role in creating a community of justice, and maybe even rethinking what is the role of our Unitarian Universalist Fellowship as we realize we must speak up more, we must stand up stronger, we must lock arms together. And what does that look like for us? And what can it look like for us as we go forward? So my question for us to consider is, what are the responsibilities of the individual in regard to issues of social justice? And a tag along is, how have you worked for justice? Let me just say it one more time. And for those on Zoom, I invite you to be engaged as well. So what are the responsibilities of the individual in regard to social justice? And if you like, how have you worked for justice? Or how do you wish to work for justice? So I'll let us pause to just think for a moment, and if you'd like to just speak to that in any way, shape, or form, or any reflections on that, can just signal to me, and I will be glad to bring you the microphone, or you're really welcome to come up here, and then we're more engaged even with our folks on Zoom.
But if you have mobility issues, stay where you are.
So are there any reflections either on the things that Sue has mentioned about a proposed 8th principle, taking things up a level, being more defined, or just your thoughts about the responsibilities of the individual?
Yeah, that's what I was pointing toward.
Civilization. I don't know how this all fits in work for justice. You have to walk the talk. You can't just give the word. It doesn't help very much. It helps. I was thinking about that as they're all reading this morning, different quotations. I'm very, very thankful for these people that say these things. I think that's what writers are for. They say things in a way that we would like to say them, but perhaps do not have the words or the skills. So I really enjoy reading good things. It helps me find myself. One other thing, I don't know if it's in here. Last night, I watched Iowa public television for a couple hours. The story of Jack Johnson, the first Black heavyweight champion of the world. I've been doing some things about him, but I did not know how involved it was. And this is a series by Ken Burns, and I think Ken Burns, in my mind, can do nothing wrong. This was the first part. But the thing that really impressed me was First of all, the black champion or the white champion never wanted to fight a black man. So he just retired. But when he finally won the world championship, there were riots throughout the entire country, like nothing. They said, we experienced nothing like that until Martin Luther King was assassinated. And they showed pictures from all over the country, the violence that took place, just because he was a black champion. As I thought about that, then I thought about Joe Louis and then Muhammad Ali. These were I think the great black champions in one way or another. But I think there'll be a couple more episodes of this, so check around and you might want to look at it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Harvey. Yeah, do you want to come up?
Speaking of PBS, this week on Frontline, I'm not sure how many saw that, but I would recommend you go back and watch it. It was about the Liberty City 7 case in Miami back in 2006. And these men were just unjustly convicted of what was it, material support of, I'm not sure what the charge was, there's a terrorism-based charge. They spent the longest one, he's out, but he's got, I just talked to him this morning, he's got 25 years of probation. He's one of his, not allowed to talk to any media or to say anything publicly. And I really, that's speaking of working to justice, you can join our Coalition for Civil Freedoms. And we've been working for this since 2010. And there's a lot of people who are now being entrapped by the FBI. And they get paid a lot to go out and entrap people who don't plan to do any sort of terrorism. And then they spend a long time in prison. It's not normal. Like, I forget what we've got people that have been entrapped by the FBI who got life sentences. So you can work for justice with us.
Yes.
Yes,
I
and
recommend Frontline. It's almost always good.
Yeah, Frontline is almost always good. Thank you for the good recommendation, but also thank you for just reminding us of the good work you're doing. And can you just say the name of that organization? I know it, but let's just say it one more time.
Coalition for Civil Freedoms.
Coalition for Civil Freedoms. Yes, or just talk to Mel. Yeah, thank you for the good work you're doing and the hands-on work you're doing. Other thoughts, other reflections?
Thanks, Karen. I just started working at the high school this past year. And as I come back for my second year, I've been notified that there are many changes in our legislature and what some of the laws are going to be. They leave me deeply troubled. And I know that this is happening all over the United States. I can't remember public law numbers or anything. This is off the top of my head. But one of the things that's coming out is that you cannot teach that the Institute of Racism is an actual institute. You have to just say, yes, racism exists and people are being discriminated against, but it is not inherently systemic. Right. So that's one of the things that's coming out. Another, I don't think it's small, but some people have said it's small, is that our governor has said now we have to go back to having the United States flag in every single classroom and say the Pledge of Allegiance every day. On one hand, I say it's good to have that fundamental community with our nation. On the other hand, they've added words like indivisible under God. I believe in the McCarthy area. So the Pledge of Allegiance is not what it was. And so my little piece will be going back and doing this. I'm just not going to say that piece. And I believe it will be tested all over the state. And those are just one more step in what's happening.
Right. Yeah, we have to keep our ear to the news. A lot of stuff is happening. I'll share a reflection. So, like a lot of you, I've done a lot of reading this year, and I learned about performative justice. But as I understand it, I've been a performative justice seeker many, many times. And that is to say, I've given a lot of lip service, and I've kvetched with friends, and I've said, oh, the injustice. And I've, gone on righteous rants, but I didn't follow it up with action. It was kind of all righteous indignation among friends. And I wasn't making an effort to really relate to other people who didn't see my perspective. I wasn't taking action to counter the direction things were going. And I was disempowered, right? I actually didn't feel like I could do something about it. I just felt angry. And I realized that is actually taught, that kind of disempowerment, that about what can we possibly do, that is a function of racism and oppression, is to say, oh, but there's nothing you can do about it, but just be angry. So learning how to take steps, reading about the people, a lot of Black women who have really taken charge and made a difference and done action and changed the way things are going. This can happen, right? And we do have to learn to talk to one another. And we do have to set aside sometimes our righteous indignations so that we can listen more fully, and then sit down and make an action plan, call people, call legislators, talk to friends, make changes. We can do it. And feeling that way is just infinitely more satisfying than just railing with my friends at the coffee shop, which I still do. But I can do that, and I can do so much more. And it feels especially empowering to have a community of yours who embrace justice and believe in action.
Thank you very much. I think some of the things you said there were spoken about. Tim Snyder, he wrote a book a few years ago on tyranny, and he talked about things you could do. I mean, writing your accomplishments, joining groups that you believe in that are doing things. So there are a number of things one can do. I guess as I get older, I can't walk into many protests, but I can write my congressman. I can talk to people. I can be in groups like you or other ones. So there are things that have effect. Don't think you have no effect, because you can. So keep that in mind. Thank you.
That brings me back to our opening words, and I just want to say a couple of sentences out of that quote. In many instances, we will be stepping out on nothing and just hoping to land on something. But that's the struggle. To live is to wrestle with despair, yet never allow despair to have the last word.
Those are good things. We're all watching the deer too.
Well, they're breaking through on this side now.
Other thoughts?
Justice goes out saying something. Just to be cute here for a moment. Justice. As I look at how I've worked mostly with economic justice, it's been important to me. So in my 20s, lots of groups for various reasons, ethnicity, skin color, political affiliation, religious affiliation. For them, when they looked at the criminal justice system, they said, does justice mean just us? And that was the play on it. And then as we got the draconian laws that came about with the crime bill that both parties worked for, that it took justice out of the hands of judges. Mandatory minimums and the mass incarceration of a large part of our population, especially the unemployed. Then it became, is it just ICE for justice? No consideration, just the law. And then you look today, when you've got so many people seeking refuge, political refuge in this country, for whatever reason, or just trying to find a job, immigrants and people coming over the border, has justice become just ICE? That's anyway.
I hope not. Any other thoughts?
So when I was gonna say this, here, I'll just send you, well.
In that I've, over the years, I mean, you all know this, but most people are waiting for somebody to do something and then they will follow them. So it's like everybody's around, everybody think they're all happy with what's going on. But if you take some action, you'll have people with you.
Words to live by. Let us just, for any thoughts left unsaid, take a moment. I noticed as we paused that the volume of our wildlife increased drastically. It's amazing. Please rise in body or in spirit. Join me in our closing song. I've got peace like a river.
I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. Strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul.
Strength like a mountain when you're 90 years old, and more like a gopher mountain.
Oh.
But you're in the garden.
All right, please join me in extinguishing our virtual chalice, reading the text printed in the bulletin.
We extinguish this chalice flame, daring to carry forward the vision of this free faith that freedom, reason, and justice will one day prevail in this nation and across the earth.
Before we adjourn for coffee, I also wanted to mention that we will be having our in-gathering out at Twin Springs on September. In-gathering at Twin Springs on September 12th, I believe is the day. Is that correct? Is that a Sunday?
Could be.
I just wanted to remind you that even if you haven't been gathering water from your summer journeys here or there, there's no problem. We haven't had many journeys in our family. So your kitchen sink or the pond in your backyard or the upper Iowa, any water will do, because it's what the words that you put into it of memory and meaning that will matter. So bring some water.
It is the 12th.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. All right, thanks. Let's join for fellowship, and thank you again to Janet
Thank
for
you, everybody,
bringing
again,
our
too.
coffee. Thanks.
Yeah, and